Good evening, everybody. This is session number 2 for Curriculum 252. And as I told you last week, I would be recording this and then putting it into Canvas so that you could watch it at your leisure. There's a lot of really important things in this particular session. So feel free to pause, to rewind, that kind of thing, so that you get all the information. There will be times when I'll just pause and expect that you will just pause me, and then you can take a look at the slide yourself and read through it rather than me having to read it aloud to you. All right, so I think we're ready to go. If you would like to, you can open your materials in Canvas for module 2, but you don't need to do that. Okay. So our week number 2, we are focusing on where we're going. I'm using the word orienteering, as if we're on a journey and we're trying to find, we're navigating. So we're going to first start out with, where we are, and then focus on where we need to go from there. So I want to focus a little bit on what we did also in last week's session, but we'll do that in a little bit. So our agenda, I'm going to just click through this. I'm not going to read them aloud to you. You can read them on your own. So we have quite a bit for this evening. All right. So our learning objectives. Tonight, we're going to be exploring the LPAC exam, the English Language Proficiency Assessment for California is what LPAC stands for. We're going to look at why it's given to our students, to all of our students, assuming they don't have a severe disability. It's given to all of our students, why we give it, and who takes it. All right, we're going to look at what exactly is the test asking our students to do. What are the tasks? I'm hoping that by the end of this session, you'll understand the reporting levels. When after a student takes the LPAC, the student will receive, and the parents will receive, a report that tells them where their student is in writing and speaking, listening. So we'll go over all those pieces. We'll also look at the performance level descriptors that the LPAC uses, and then also our ELD proficiency levels, which is what we look at when we look at our ELD standards. So we'll go into that in more detail, obviously, this evening. We will go in and look actually at an LPAC student report. Sometimes it's easier if you actually see it as we talk through it. It makes more sense. So we'll take a look at that report. We are going to look at resources relating to the assessments of ELs. What sort of resources do we have to assess our ELs, particularly with students with disabilities? Obviously, as special ed teachers, that's really the lens through which you look at your English language learners, is as a student with a learning challenge. Understand the holistic EL student profile. This is an assignment that we're going to have for this evening as a piece of your homework, and I'll go over what exactly the holistic EL student profile is. And I'm also going to introduce another homework assignment that's going to be done over the course of the next few weeks, which is the ELL Instructional Supports and Strategy Log. It's an ongoing assignment. So we'll talk more about that. And hopefully by the end, my learning objective for this evening, by the end of this evening, you understand what I'm asking you to do. And then we will be focusing also on oral literacy strategies. This whole class is around English language learner strategies. How can we help support our English language learners? What can we do? What strategies can we use? So tonight we're going to focus on oral literacy strategies. So getting our students to speak, right? And that's a big deal for English language learners. They don't often do enough of it in a classroom. All right, there are lots of TPEs that we're addressing in session 2. So I'm just going to click through this. Again, feel free to pause it if you want to and take a look at these. But it's a big subject that we're tackling this evening, and it covers a lot of the teacher performance expectations. All right, so a quick review of the homework from last week. I had you looking at the ELD standards, the organization of those standards. So that was chapter 1 that you read in the, excuse me, the ELD standards. And then you also looked at the proficiency descriptors. So to go back to kind of the standards and how they're organized, you looked at, understood that there was an introduction, an overall kind of introduction to each, to the ELD standard. And then it broke it up into other parts. Now, I know it was just an overview, and I'm going to say this, at least for me, it's kind of overwhelming. And until you actually get into it and use the document to just sort of read over it, I understand it can be kind of overwhelming, confusing. It's a lot, and it is. So if you're feeling kind of that, I don't know what am I doing here with these? Fear not. This is just the very beginning. This class is an introduction. We've got 5 weeks to go over things that we could spend an entire year on, to be perfectly honest with you. So as an introductory course, I just want to sort of let you know that these things exist. And then depending on your teaching assignment, depending on what the requirements are of your particular situation, you will dive into it more or less depending, right? So my sort of goal here is just to get you familiarized with what they are, that there are ELD standards, that they have a particular organization, and that we have proficiency descriptors for what is an EL student who is a level 1, and what is that? Or what is it if they are an emerging EL learner? So we'll go into that a little bit more this evening as well. So you just got a little overview of it through the homework in reading. And then I had you read the document that I think is really, and I said this last week, kind of the marching orders, the North Star for you as special education teachers, the California Practitioner's Guide for Educating English Learners with Disabilities. And as I had said, also just a reminder, this is a document that is new for us, and thankfully so, because it was kind of the wild, wild west out there. We didn't have clear direction from the state, and now we have it. So this really is something that, again, we're going to give you kind of an introduction to it in this course. But for those of you who like to actually have a physical copy, a paper copy, see if you can just get these pages printed off so you have it at your fingertips, or of course through these slide deck in this class, you have the access to it electronically. But it is something that my guess is you will go to again and again for guidance, right? So right now we're just kind of getting the lay of the land with this document. And you read chapter 3, all right, which was identifying your English language learners with disabilities, and really understanding the difference between language development and a student with disabilities. In our state, and I think I said this last week, we have over-identified often our English language learners into special education, because developing language can look the same as a student who's struggling with a learning disability. However, the difference that is very clear is that that disability is going to be present in both the language, the L1 language, the primary language. So for most of our students, that primary language is Spanish. It is going to be evident in their primary language as well as in the language they're learning, English, right? So that chapter went over kind of making sure that you're understanding and really looking at your student so that you're not over-identifying. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this assignment that's going to be due for next week, the Holistic EL Student Profile. And I want to talk for a moment about why I'm having you do this. And I think, though, for special education teachers, this should all make perfect sense. As special education teachers, one of your main jobs, if you will, is to gather data in order to guide you in your teaching of the student and, you know, next steps and that kind of thing. So that's what this document does, is gives you a place to gather data, and from the data then make some create a goal or goals for the student. So I'm assuming that you have an English language learner in your class, all right, or in your program. So what you will do with this, and we'll go in, I'm going to show you an example later on in the slide deck so that it should be pretty clear to you. But you'll put the student's first name and last initial. We don't need full name because, you know, this keeps it anonymous. Then you're going to gather data, linguistic data. So you're going to look at their LPAC scores. Again, this is assuming the student's taken the LPAC. If they are an EL, they will have taken the LPAC. So what is their overall score? And again, this is going to make more sense a little bit later on. When we look at an LPAC report, you'll see where the overall score is reported. You will list the score for the oral language, written language, and then that's broken up into subtypes: listening, speaking, reading, writing. So you'll have a score for each of those. Then I'd like you to go in to your student information system, is often where that's held. Your student information system is where the CASP scores will be. If you could come up with the ELA CASP score as well as the math, and then any other academic data scores that they might have, all right? So this is going to give you a little bit of a snapshot. And then this is what I find really important, is the anecdotal data that you would have on a student. What do you know about the student in getting to know them? What information do you have about their family, about their background? And again, I have an example that I'll be showing you a little bit later using a sample student. From your data now, from your linguistic data and your academic data, your anecdotal data, now we're going to move into, so what are these students' strengths? What are these students' needs? As far as that you see academically, what are their needs? And what goal or goals do you have for this student? Now, you're not writing an official goal here. This is more just sort of conversational, if you will. You're talking yourself through it. You're notating it, but it doesn't have to be written as an official IEP goal, for instance, right? So I have the directions here. I'm going to click on this so you can take a look at it. And this is, these are in Canvas for you. So I guess what you really need to know is don't choose any more than 5 students. If you happen to have a whole lot of EL students, do not choose more than 5 students, all right? I'm not asking that has to be that much. You should be able to find this information in your student information system. Many schools use ARIES. It should be found there. If you're struggling, this is a really great opportunity for you to reach out to someone in your department, to a mentor teacher, and find out, how do I access this data? Where do I find it? Because it should, as special education teachers, it should be readily available to you, because you can't really make a move unless you've got the data. You don't really know what the students' strengths and their needs are unless you've looked at the data. All right. So, and I say here, if you have more than 5 students who are ELs, choose a range of English language learners if possible, from an English language learner who might be a level 1, just learning the language, let's say, all the way to a level 4 where they potentially have been redesignated. They might be now exited out of the English language program, potentially. So a range if possible. But again, if you just have 1 student, that's fine too. This assignment is more around the actual practice of gathering the data and thinking about it in a certain way, to kind of give us a direction, because remember, orienteering is the kind of the focus of this session, to give you a focus, or to give you a direction as far as where you need to take the student. Where is the student and where do you need to take the student? Okay. So again, this slide, a slide similar to this, will be further into the slide deck with an example where I've filled it out with a particular student. So hopefully that will be helpful. Okay, so where do we go from here? Getting our bearings. I know, again, as special education teachers, this is something that is very familiar to you, far more familiar than, to say, teachers in single subject teachers. The use of data, the use of assessments that kind of ground us, that here's where we are, and then guide us forward. So in that, when we are looking at assessments, sort of the big daddy of assessments for our English language learners is the LPAC. Again, the English Language Proficiency Assessment for California. All right, so there are 2 separate assessments in the LPAC. And again, I'm not expecting you to memorize this or anything. I just want to give you, we're doing a flyover. I want to give you an overview of this so that you feel a little bit more confident when somebody starts talking about the LPAC. So the first one here is the initial assessment, okay? And actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. When a student enters school in California, now that may be TK, it may be they come in at 8th grade, but whenever it is, when they come into California's public schools, there will be a home language survey to all students. They all receive it, and I'm going to click on this link here so you get a sort of a sense of what this looks like. If you hear about the home language survey, this is what it looks like. The parent fills this out. And basically what they're asking, what they're trying to understand is, what language did the child first learn when they began to talk? Which language does your child most frequently speak at home? Which language do you, the parents, guardians, most frequently use when speaking to the child, and so on. And if there's anything marked that's not English, 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 it automatically then puts the student into the LPAC bucket, if you will. The student then, if they have another language other than English, and they might be completely bilingual, but if it's anything but English, they will then be given the initial assessment for the LPAC. It's administered only 1 time during a student's time in California schools. And from that, then either the student, it's clear that the student does not need English learner services. If they do not need English learner services, they are, if they are bilingual and at grade level with their English language proficiency, they are exited immediately. So they are called Fluent English Proficient, or FEP, okay, Fluent English Proficient, and they don't receive any English language services. Now, if a student takes that initial assessment and they are not reading and writing, listening, speaking at grade level in English, then they will then be receiving English language development services, or ELD, right? And then every year, they will also be taking the summative assessment, the LPAC summative assessment. That's given in the spring to see where they are in their language development as they are receiving English language development support, okay? And when a student shows proficiency at grade level, they are then redesignated fluent English proficient, okay? Redesignated, and that's called RFEP. Okay, you'll hear somebody, oh, they've been RFEP'd. We love these acronyms and we use them as verbs. So if a kid has been RFEP'd, they've been redesignated, they've been exited out of the English language development program. They no longer receive the English language support. They don't need it anymore. Now, you'll notice here in this description that it says that the results from the test are used as one of 4 criteria to determine if the student is ready to be reclassified as fluent English proficient. So this is not a one and done. So it's just one of 4 criteria. What are the 4 criteria? Well, number 1, the LPAC. Teacher evaluation, they will reach out to the teachers and find out if sort of anecdotally, how's the student performing in class, particularly in their English language, not English language, in their ELA class, right? There's also parent consultation. Does the parent feel like the student is ready to be exited? And then there is a empirical data. So they're going to look, there's another test that they're going to look at, other data where the student is measured against students of the same grade level. For most students in Sonoma County, as well as other counties around here, that test that our LEAs use, our local education agencies, LEA, your school district is an LEA. What they use is the CASP test. It used to be called the STAR. It's now called the CASP or the SBAC, but the Smarter Balanced, right? So that gives us information as to how the student is performing against other students of the same grade level. So given those 4 criteria, if it looks like the student is ready to be reclassified, then there is someone at your school who is in charge of this, or at your district who's in charge of identifying these students and reclassifying them, okay? So our LPAC initial assessment, usually if you are, if you are teaching in any of the grades beyond kindergarten or in Sonoma County, you won't really even hear much about the initial assessment. For many of our students in Sonoma County, they come to us in kindergarten, right, or TK. That doesn't mean that they are not still receiving English language development services. And we talked in session 1 about our long-term English language learners and how many of those we have, that they have been in our school systems for 6-7 years, and they in California, and they still are not reading, writing, speaking, listening to grade level in English. Okay, so they have not yet been able to be redesignated. So they're still receiving services and they're still taking the LPAC every spring. All right. So why it's given, it's to identify students who are limited in English, which is important because we want to support our students. We know that they need to receive extra support so that they can do well in school and have access to the full curriculum. All right, and we've already gone over who takes it, right? The initial assessment and then the summative assessment. Okay. So I want to kind of, again, this is, for many of you, this isn't necessarily going to be super relevant. You're not going to be giving the LPAC, right? The LPAC test, you won't be administering that test, I'm guessing. But I always think it's a good idea when we're talking about testing and particularly with you as special education teachers, and you're using the data to inform your instruction and your support for the students, I think it's important for you to know something about the test that you're looking at, that you're taking the data from. So the LPAC has 4 separate tasks: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Oral language, written language. So we're going to first look at oral language. So oral language has 2 parts, right? Listening and speaking. So in the LPAC test, for the listening part of oral language, the students are asked to listen to a short exchange. They're going to listen with, earphones, and then they'll be asked questions about that short exchange or dialogue. They're going to be listening to a classroom conversation. They are going to listen to an oral presentation, like a teacher teaching something. And then they are going to listen to a speaker supporting an opinion about something, okay? And then there will be, with all 4 of those, they will be asked questions to test their oral comprehension, their listening comprehension. Now, with speaking, so now we're asking the students in the oral language to produce language. In the speaking, we show them a picture of a scene, of something going on a picture, and we ask them to talk about the scene, what's happening in the scene. We have them, we're looking for different speech functions. What does that mean? The speech function is, I'll give you kind of an example of the question. You missed yesterday's class because you weren't feeling well. You need to go to your teacher and ask what homework there was for the day that you missed. What would you say? So we're prompting the student to ask a question. We're giving them an audience. So they're asking the teacher, and what was the purpose? The purpose is to find out what the homework is. So there are these little sort of vignettes, if you will, about what you're doing. They might be explaining, they might be asking. So those are the speech functions, okay? We ask them to support an opinion. Your town is going to be is thinking about either putting in a swim center for the students or for the townspeople, or a skateboard park. What do you think would be the best choice for your town, and why? So they have an opinion, they support it with their reasoning. They're presenting and discussing information. So they read about something and then they present it, they talk about it. And then they are asked to summarize an academic presentation. So they listen to the oral presentation and then they're asked to summarize it. So that's the oral language piece, listening and speaking. Now, the written language has 2 parts, reading and writing. So in the reading, they're reading a short informational passage and they're answering questions on it. So we're testing their reading comprehension, right? They read a student essay. So we're giving them different types of writing. So a student essay, they read a literary passage, and then they read an informational passage. Again, with questions to test that they're understanding what they're reading. And then with writing, they are asked to describe a picture, and they're doing the description in writing. It's a sentence or 2 to describe the picture. They are asked to write about an experience, and there will be a prompt that will will be more specific about an experience, what experience they're to write about. They are to write about academic information as well as justify an opinion. Okay, so those are the writing pieces. And notice these are for both the slide previous and this one. These are LPAC tasks for 6th grade through 12th grade. These are not necessarily the tasks that are for elementary school, although many of them are included. But obviously for kindergarten, they don't have the reading to the level and the writing. So, but they do have the speaking and listening for sure. Okay. All right. So our students take the LPAC in the spring. the initial something different, but they take, if they have not yet been redesignated, they take the LPAC in the spring, and then there's the reporting of it. The school gets a copy of it, so it will land in their CUME file, and then the parents get a copy of the report. All right. And the one that you'll be looking at is what's available in the CUME, although chances are you don't have to go to the CUME and look at the paper piece. It's going to be in your student information system. So again, this is going to make more sense when we actually look at a paper copy of the test report. But there is first an overall score for all 4 pieces: reading, writing, speaking, listening, right? There's an overall score. And that overall score is given, it's 1 through 4. Okay. They earn either a 1, a 2, a 3, or 4. And these 1 through 4 is level. Level 1 is they're beginning to develop. Level 2, they're somewhat developed. 3, moderately developed. 4, well developed. Okay. In order for a student to be redesignated, they have to be at level 4, right? In those areas. All right. So overall score 1 through 4. And if you wanted to click on this, well, there'll be the next slide will give us the actual description. I'll show you what that is. But if you were to click on this slide, it would also give you a document that showed in more detail, what does it mean when you're beginning to develop, or what does it mean when it's somewhat developed? All right. Also on this report, we have composite scores. Okay. There's going to be the overall score, and then there's going to be a score for oral language 1 through 4, and for written language 1 through 4, right? Also, they've teased it even further. Under oral language, you're going to get a score for the speaking part of the test, as well as the listening part of the test. But if you notice, that's not a 1 through 4. That's a 1 through 3, 3 being the highest, 1 being beginning. All right. So why they did it this way? Good question. But the larger scores are 1 through 4 to kind of tease it out further, I suppose. And then the individual tasks are given 1 through 3. Okay. So again, you'll see this on a report that we'll take a look at. Now, when we're talking about the performance levels 1 through 4, here it is on this slide. This is what it means to be a 1. English learner at this level have minimally developed oral, listening and speaking, and written, reading and writing English skills, and so on. And then all the way through well developed. Okay. And you can see it's minimally developed, somewhat developed, moderately developed, well developed. It's a rubric, right? It's performance descriptors. It's like a rubric. All right. Now for the LPAC, those are our performance descriptors. You notice something else happens in blue, the ELD standards. And you looked at that a little bit, that document a little bit for homework in session 1. And you notice that there were 3 levels of performance, of proficiency, I guess they're using the word proficiency here, not performance, but 3 levels of proficiency for the ELD standards: emerging, expanding, and bridging. Now, you've got 4 performance levels and 3 proficiency levels. How does that work? Well, this shows you graphically how this works. Whoops, I'm sorry about that. When you have a level 1, it's emerging. It matches up 1 to 1, okay? Expanding covers both level 2 and level 3. The beginning of level 2 to the middle of level 3. Okay, because these are continuum. You'll see that these levels are a continuum. From this score to this score is a level 1, from this score to this score is a level 2, and so on. So you could be at the end of level 2, or excuse me, the beginning of level 2 to the middle of level 3, and you're expanding. And then if you're at the top middle of level 3 and all the way through level 4, you're bridging. And in this particular document, the next row here is Well, what is the level of support that a student at these different proficiency levels needs? Obviously, for an emerging student who's their English is just emerging, they need substantial support. Students at the early stages of emerging level can engage in complex, cognitively demanding social and academic activities, but they need substantial support. And then for the level 2-3, it's moderate support, and level 3-4, it's light support. Now, I have linked on this slide a really fabulous document called the English Learner Toolkit of Strategies, and I'm going to click on that to just show you that it exists. You have access to it with this slide deck. Again, depending on what your teaching assignment is, how many ELs you have in your classroom, this may or may not be something that you're turning to, but I just wanted to show you briefly what this is, because it is a really great resource. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of click through it. So this is, I think, chapter 4 on is where it really is important. These kind of is an overview. Components of a comprehensive ELD program and planning for instruction. But when we get to chapter 4, we get into the nitty-gritty of instructional strategies to help our students, word phrase level strategies, helping them develop academic vocabulary. And the Freyer model we're definitely going to take a look at. Sentence deconstruction, pulling sentences apart, putting them back together, understanding the way that English sentences are put together. For instance, understanding that in English, we put the adjective, the descriptive word before the noun, and in Spanish and other Latin languages, it comes after. So understanding the way that we construct a sentence by pulling apart, putting them back together. So there's lots of different, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but you can click on this. There's lots of strategies here that help you support your students, and particularly when you're working with them in your in your classroom, this can be really a helpful tool. Okay, a helpful resource. All right, so here's a look at a report. This is a pretend report. This is on the LPAC website. So this is a report. If little Yuma, Arizona, who's in 2nd grade, her parents would receive this report. And you'll notice at the top is the name of the student. This is a summative LPAC score report, not an initial, it's the summative, which is, again, every spring, this is what they take. And this is for 2019-20. And she was in grade 2 when she took the test. Okay. Here you'll find the student's number, the birth date, the grade, the test date, so spring of 2020, the school, what school, what local education agency. So this would be their school district, and this is the school district number. Okay, not that you need to know any of that, but just kind of so we can read the doc. All right, so here is Yuma's overall score. She has scored a level 3 overall, reading, writing, speaking, listening. When they pull everything together, she's a level 3. She scored a 1531 overall. Now, what's important to look at, and particularly for you all that are going to be looking at kind of data, looking and diving into the data, 1531, what's important is to go down here. It says a level 3, but look at this. A level 3 score is 1471 to 1531. She's almost a level 4, isn't she? She's 1 point away from a level 4. Does that matter? I would argue 100% it matters. On a lot of levels, even just talking to Yuma about, wow, you're really close to level 4 and how fantastic, and that kind of thing, right? So she's right on the edge to get herself into a level 4. All right. So that's her overall score. Now we're going to look over on page 2 where they've broken them up into the oral language and the written language. And remember, I said the oral language and written language, the overall scores are out of 4. So for oral language, she's a level 3. And I like this. It shows kind of like a thermometer. We can see there that she's almost at a level 4 with her oral language. So if we want to bump her from a 3 to a 4, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's just look at this. So she's a level 3 here, almost a 4 in her oral language. And when we look at breaking that down into listening and speaking, the oral language part, she's in the middle. She's 2 out of 3 for listening and speaking, about even, right? Remember what I said when they do the kind of break it down smaller, the oral language into listening and speaking, it's out of 3. 1, 2, 3. For the larger, it's out of 4. Okay, then we go down, we look at her written language, and she's level 4. She's, she's solid in their level 4. And notice both reading and writing, she is a 3 out of 3, right? She's well developed in both. All right. So if I was her teacher and I'm trying to be strategic about this and move her into that level 4 for overall score, I would really be concentrating on her oral language, right? She's almost at a 4. So let's really kind of focus on that. What can we do with the oral language development? Because she's there. Certainly we're going to keep supporting the written language, the reading and the writing, but she's already showing that she's, well developed in that area. She's room to move as well, but she's well developed. We want to kind of focus on the oral language. All right. Now, if they've taken the LPAC before, as apparently Yuma has, she took it in first grade, the other scores will be down here showing. This way you really can see growth, hopefully, for a student, that they are moving up rather than stagnating or even falling. And it is possible for students to fall, because each year it gets more challenging, because grade level, reading, writing, speaking, and listening gets more challenging. So staying steady isn't good enough. By staying steady, you're gonna fall behind. I think that probably makes perfect sense, right? So this will show the history of this down here of the LPAC. All right, and here's the scores. If you're in grades, this is just 7 through 12. But you can if you click that link up here, you can go in and find K through 12. I just have a snapshot here of grades 7 through 12. But this, again, allows us to really kind of see where they are, the minimum and maximum of each level. So we have a better sense of, are they just into the level, or are they about to exit the level, or are they dead center in it? Okay. So I think this can be a helpful document, right? So here we find ourselves. We've looked at the LPAC. Again, I know it's a lot of information, all kind of fire hosed at you. I apologize. But we've looked at the LPAC, what it is, what are the kids doing? What are we asking them to do? We've looked at the reporting and what that means. So now what? Now we take this understanding of the test and the reporting, the data collection, and we put it into action. So our journey begins. And our journey is to move the students forward, right? So what we're going to be using is to kind of help us in our planning and our mapping out our journey is the student profile that I talked about earlier, early in the slide deck. We'll look at that again. We'll look at we just looked at the LPAC profile. I'm thinking of the holistic student profile. That's what we looked at very early on. So the holistic EL student profile, we'll look at the LPAC profile, and then we're going to look at the supports and strategies log that I'm going to have you begin. All right, so here's an example of what I'm asking you to do. All right, so first thing, and this is, let me back up. This is information you're going to need for your holistic EL student profile. Okay, that document that we looked at the very, very beginning of the slide deck, where you take one of your EL students, you give me LPAC data, you give me CASP data, you give me anecdotal thoughts that you have, things that you know about the student, and then you identify strengths, needs, and kind of next steps, right? That's the EL student profile. So we're going to do it for Alexandra, all right? And Alexandra, this is what her hers looks like in her CUM folder, all right? It, like I said, her information would be in the student information system as well. It just wouldn't have necessarily, although actually I'm saying this, I think you can click as you kind of go deeper in the information system, it will give you this sort of speedometer kind of thing. So you can see pretty easily where they are in the level, right? How close are they to the next level, so to speak. So for Alexandra, she took it 9th grade. We're looking at her 9th grade assessment. And she was a level 1 overall. And she's not that close to level 2. She is pretty solid level 1. All right. And notice this was the first time that she took the LPAC. So she'd taken the, she'd taken the initial. Now this is her first time taking the LPAC. All right. So she's a level 1. When we look at her oral language, she's also a level 1. Again, pretty solidly level 1. And same with written language. All right. And under her oral, listening and speaking is beginning, as is her reading and writing. Right. So again, this is that EL student profile. So I would put Alexandra G here, and then I would put her overall would be, I would put her, the scores in here, okay? You could, if you want, you could put overall 1, oral language 1, but I think depending on what would be most useful to you, that's what I'm gonna say to you. You could put the score, if that would be most helpful, or you could put this, the overall score, or you could put 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. Whatever is easier for you. But if we were doing, or more, not easier, I should say, but would be most effective for you as you're looking at things. Honestly, for Alexandra, I might just put a 1, a 1, a 1, a 1. Why? Because she is right in there at a 1. She is not close to tipping into the level 2 at this point. Not like our Yuma, Arizona was, right? Miss Little Yuma, I would put her score down, her point score, overall points, right? Because she's so close to a level, to moving up to a level 4. All right, then I would also need to get the CASP data for Alexandra, her ELA, her English Language Arts CASP score, and then her math score. All right, and then anecdotal data and analysis. So on this next slide, I've done it for you. This is what yours is going to look like-ish, right? So what I did for Alexandra, here you see level 1, there's her score, level 1 score, and then she's beginning in all of these, right? She was a level 1 in the CASP, there's her score, and level 1 in math, there's her score. All right, so anecdotal data. Well, what do I know about Alexandra? Well, she immigrated with her family from Guatemala 2 years ago and spoke no English. She's been enrolled in school since arriving. She loves to draw. She's very quiet in class, but talks enthusiastically in Spanish to other Spanish fluent students. Okay, so this is what I've learned about her, and about her family, about how long has she been here, something that she loves to draw. Is this important? I think it's important because we want to build on our students' strengths. So to be able to identify something she loves to do, she likes to talk. She's social, but she's social in her primary language because that's what she's most comfortable in. So I think what you can put in for anecdotal data that just kind of shows that that student. And it kind of is a springboard then for coming up with our strengths and our needs. So her strengths, I said she's animated and talkative in her L1, in her primary language, very artistic and has beautiful handwriting. She's always willing to begin working in class when assignment is given. When encouraged to write in Spanish, her writing production is high. Okay, she's very fluent in her L1, both in writing and in speaking, and that's important to note. Okay, now her needs: she seems to struggle working independently. She needs support in understanding my directions and in accessing the text. She needs support in writing as well. My goal or goals for Alexandra. My goals are to continue to make her feel comfortable and welcome in my classroom. I want to pair her with another student who speaks Spanish to help translate when she's having difficulty. I want to find a text written in Spanish to help her grasp the concepts before she begins reading the class text. I also want to find a way to encourage her drawing and connect it to learning content in my class, perhaps taking notes graphically. Okay, so this is an example of what I'm wanting. Again, notice my goal is not, I'm not writing an IEP goal that she'll do at 80%, she'll do, you know, this at 80% level. This is just much more kind of thinking on paper kind of a thing. They're much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just, I'm spacing it anyway. So hopefully this helps you. And I would say, just sort of putting another kind of part of my teacher hat on, is that giving exemplars, giving examples to students is really powerful, so that, you know, if you're doing the work yourself, if you're doing an assignment yourself, it's actually, in advertising, they call it dog fooding. So if you give an assignment, do it yourself, do the assignment yourself. It is going to do two things that are both really worthwhile. Number one, it'll show you if there's any kind of problems with the assignment, problems with the directions. Is it too hard? Is it going to take longer than you thought? Is it going to take shorter than you had planned? Whatever. So you kind of get the sense of the assignment. And then even better, or equally as good, I guess, is that you have an example now to show students. When I do examples of my work, I always put on my sort of student hat, and I do it. I'm not going to do it necessarily to the level that I'm going to have the words be a little less academic sounding, potentially. Not conversational, but what I would expect out of a student level work, right? But it really helps students to see what's expected. How much are they supposed to write, that kind of thing. So a picture's worth 1,000 words kind of idea. I know the word I'm looking for is informal. Your goal here is much more, it's written in a much more informal way than if you were writing an IEP goal. All right. That is not what I wanted to do. Let's come back here. All right, so I now want to kind of switch into our document that we're looking at, the California Practitioner's Guide. And for homework for this week, I'm going to have you read chapter 4, looking at the assessment of English learners, their assessment for special education, right? For assessing students to identify them as students with disabilities. And this chapter goes into all kinds of, it's fabulous. Now, let me also say that this came out just a couple of years ago, and there are still many districts and many special education teachers who are not familiar with this document. You may be talking to someone in your department who doesn't know that this exists, and you're going to be doing them a huge favor in sharing that it does. Because as I said, this is our North Star here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to make things up. It's all here, and it has the seal of approval from the state of California. And this is something that should be shared as well with your admin. Your principal should be aware of this document, that it's out there, and that it really is clear about what our responsibilities are for assessing our students and identifying our students as students with disabilities. So you'll go in and you'll read chapter 4. And one of the things that's really wonderful about chapter 4 and about the document as a whole is the resources that it gives us. Again, when I said reinventing the wheel, it's giving us resources that are tried and true and developed and researched. San Diego Unified was way ahead of the curve. They have so many English language learners, and they really were well-organized district and came up with some fabulous documents to help gather data and to look at it, to assess it. So one of the things that they have here, it's linked here, and it's of course in your in what you'll read for your homework, is this evaluation process. So I'm going to click on this just so you can kind of take a look. So this is something that you can use as part of the IEP team, who's going to be reviewing data and the testing and recommending or not a student into special education. So it's asking you to review background information. It's giving you prompts here. You've got the assessment data here. The IEP team determination of eligibility, and so on. So it just is it's a document that pulls everything together. This document could go then into their CURR folder kind of a thing. So you can use it, you can create it for your own schools or district, but it's already been created for you. So if you're, it's really helpful. And covers all of the parts, all the pieces that we should be looking at when we're determining a student's eligibility for special education. Okay, it's hard to do this without getting. I keep wanting to say, are there any questions, any comments? So if you have any questions as we go through this or as you hear this, please email me. It probably messaging through Canvas, I will see it, but it's actually better if you just email me at my Pet K-12 email. I look at that all the time, whereas I don't see your messages in Canvas until I'm actually in Canvas and I'm doing grading and things like that. So I would love to hear if you have questions, that kind of thing. And although as I told you in week 1, I'm not doing session 2 in person because will have had surgery the day before. I still plan to be, I'm hoping I'll be able to, by, Wednesday, Thursday, open my computer and be coherent. So if you've emailed me with questions, I'd be happy to get back to you on those. Or when we get together not in person, but on Zoom together in real time for session 3, feel free, jot the questions down, and I'll give us time to kind of, I'll open it up to see if there's anything that you had questions about in this session. And again, knowing that there's a lot here. There is a lot here. Okay, so now we're going to kind of switch gears. We've talked about the LPAC. We've talked about kind of pulling all that data together, thinking about our students. You're going to read chapter 4 in the practitioner's guide about taking that data from the LPAC and as well as through the special ed testing, and then making a recommendation for students into special education. So there's all that piece. Now, this is a piece, an assignment for this class, and something that is specific for your credential. In order for us to get our certification as a program so that you can get a legitimate teaching credential, we have to show the Department of Education that you are learning certain things. And the way that we show that you're learning certain things is to capture work that you're doing in a document. So thus the log that I'm asking that you do. So this whole class is around strategies that support English learners, all right? We haven't quite got into the nitty-gritty of the strategies yet. We'll do that in just a minute for oral strategies. But the focus of this class, in large part, is on what do we do to support our English language learners? What are some good teaching strategies that we can use that support our English language learners, and bonus, support all of our students? Because as I mentioned in session 1, all our students are English language learners. We are all English language learners. We don't have a complete command of our language. We learn new words, we learn new things about our language. We also are English language learners. So the strategies that we use for our English language learners can help all our students, and many of them are, you'll notice, are you like, oh, that's a strategy we use for special education students. Yes. Okay. So they cross over. There's a lot of crossover there with English language learners, supporting their language development and supporting students with learning disabilities. Okay. So this particular log is something you'll be doing over the next few weeks. It will be due the last class. All right. And I'm going to go into some detail about exactly, well, what are you supposed to do here? All right. So there is a set of directions in Canvas, but I'm also going to show them to you to kind of get an overall, well, what is this all about? All right, so you notice it's due by our last class on October 19th. It should be uploaded into Canvas. It's worth 20 points. So here's the nitty gritty. You're going to record at least 3 strategies or supports for each of the following literacy demands. You'll list 3 strategies that can be used for reading support, 3 for writing, 3 for speaking and listening, and 3 for vocabulary building. So you'll have on your log a total of 12 strategies, right? So you will see there will be a total of 12. And I think I just have 12 lines here, actually. So 3 will be reading, 3 will be writing, 3 will be speaking and listening, and 3 will be vocabulary support. Okay. And then you will let me know which one's which, because used for, so it would be like reading, here are my strategies, and so on. Okay. Then you're going to list for each of the strategies that you've listed what TPEs are addressed by the support. It's always important we bring things back to the teacher performance expectations, because ultimately when you get into year 2, you will be doing your teaching performance assessment. And that's how you actually get your credential. You have to pass that assessment. It's a portfolio of work that you're putting together, very prescriptive. They tell you exactly what you need in it. But you'll put together this portfolio, you will submit it to the Department of Education, and they will, it will be read by a reader, and you will pass or not pass, you will pass. And that will then allow the Be a Teacher program to present you with your preliminary credential. Okay. So we always want to remind ourselves, what are those teacher performance expectations? When I'm doing this strategy, what teacher performance expectation or expectations am I addressing? So take some time to connect that. What are the TPE or TPEs that are associated with that particular strategy? Then you're also going to give a brief but clear description of the strategy, like how is it done? All right. So you'll give a description. How do you use it? How is it? What do you do? Right now, the last 2 columns here, you're only going to fill in for one of the strategies, one of the 12. Okay. So you are going to use one of the 12 strategies and provide evidence of your use. I hope you use all 12, but you need to provide evidence of use of one. All right. So what does that evidence of use look like? It could be, if you're using a graphic organizer, for instance, it could be you take a picture of the graphic organizer with your phone and you upload it, you link it to evidence of use. Okay, like picture of graphic organizer. I click on it, there's the picture. Okay. It might be a brief video if you want to do that. I find it's probably easier as I've looked at people's logs. It seems what most people go towards is taking a picture of something that students have done for evidence of use, right? And then you're going to, for that one strategy that you've given evidence of use, you're going to tell me what happened when you used it, what worked well, and what didn't work. All right. So these last two columns you only do for one of the strategies. And that says that in our directions here. This fourth bullet of the 12 strategies you've logged, you choose one. You provide evidence of use, a video or image, and then reflect on the strategy. All right. And the way I've broken this up, the way that I've worked this is that each class, each session, I will be providing you strategies. So if you just list a few of the strategies on your log that we go over in class, you're golden. You don't have to go get extra strategies if you don't want to, or there might be some, oh, I know some great ones for reading support that we didn't go over in class, but that I use or have seen used. I want to do those. Absolutely. But for those of you who are like, I don't know strategies, help me. The class is set up to do that. So this slide just goes over the instructions just the way that I showed you on the document, the instruction document. This kind of is another way of looking at it. And here linked are the directions and so on. All right. And they're all available in module 2. All right. So this is the part that I'm going to let you do by yourself. Like this is you're going to do independently. I'm going to just quickly kind of go over a few of these. And one of them kind of goes into depth. So we're looking at ways to support our students' oral language and their speaking. And one of the things that we know about English language learners is that they need to talk in academic settings much, much more. If you think about your English language learners, and I'm not talking about the ones who are newcomers, who are kind of in that silent period of language development where they just don't even know enough of the language to put words together necessarily. But we're talking about students who have been in our school system for several years. They're often very quiet in class. They are not the ones raising their hands or, and often teachers won't call on them because we're like, well, we don't want to put them on the spot. Well, we've got to find a way around that because they need the airtime. They need to be able to speak in an academic setting. So some things that can support this is the elbow partner turn and talk, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Another fun game is famous person mystery. Now these are all linked and there's a little video that goes along with this. It's something similar to, kind of guess who I am. And they're asking questions about who they are, and their partner is yes or no. And so they're having to formulate questions. So a lot of language is being used to kind of figure out, well, who am I? 5-3-1, where this can be used in different ways, but tell 5 things that you learned, 3 ways that you're going to use it. There's just different ways of doing that. Anyway, these are all linked to kind of show you, giving you examples of how they're used and what the strategy is. It describes the strategy, how it's used. Inside outside circle, where it's almost like speed dating, if you will. It gets kids talking to each other and then they're facing each other. There's an inside circle, outside circle, and then they switch. It moves one person and then they talk again with this new partner and then again with this new partner. It can be used for, review, test prep, telling stories, you name it. But again, it's getting kids to talk. Think, pair, share. We're pretty familiar with that. So I want you to go through all of those, click on them, take a look at what each one is, and then hopefully use them in your classroom as it is appropriate. I know with this, with special education, there is this wide range of, the ability level of your students. Some of you have students who potentially are just nonverbal, they're severely disabled. Others of you have mildly, students who have mild disability. So of course you have to use these as they are relevant in your own classroom. But that said, being new teachers, you never know the twists and turns of life, and what you have right now and the assignment that you have right now might not be what your teaching assignment looks like in 3 years or 5 years or next year. So kind of keeping an open mind and looking at things with the idea that you might not have these same students in this same type of assignment forever until you retire. It's kind of that growth mindset and that lifelong learner approach. Now you'll notice the last strategy here, talk moves and checklist, is highlighted. I highlight it because on the next slide, I give you, this is kind of like dig in and give you detail. I would like you to watch this YouTube video that shows you students using talk moves. This is something that's really helpful for our English language learners, as well as our just regular ed and special ed students, to support them in having academic conversations, giving them sentence starters so that they sound, so that their language is more precise, so they sound more academic, and so that they can have an academic conversation. Okay. So, and supporting their students or supporting their peers when they're saying, well, pressing for reasoning, what is your evidence? Asking that question really helps support the student who's now got to come up with what is their evidence. So the talk moves in the source materials, the course materials, I should say, for our session 2 materials, you'll find there's a handout here. You can print this out as like a little bookmark for your students so they have it on their desk. You notice in this video, the kids have the talk moves bookmark right there on their desk for all, it's just there. So they have it readily available. You can create a poster that's up on the wall for students for these sentence starters. But more than anything, with this strategy, it's practice, it's practice, it's practice. The kids it will be awkward at first if they've never done this before. You'll want to model this with them and practice, have them practicing together as a class, like with you, before you set them out on their own in small groups. All right. But to continue to use this strategy is so helpful for students, because once they can speak this, once they've got the talk moves, the next step into writing is a smooth transition for most students. If you can talk it, you can write it. Okay. So, and for a lot of our students, writing is pretty intimidating, the blank piece of paper. But first get them to talk it, get them to be able to marshal evidence as they speak. Then they can the writing becomes much less onerous and intimidating. All right, so please look at this short video on from Edutopia. And then again, the talk moves is in your course materials, and you're welcome to reproduce it and have, depending on your teaching assignment, it might be a great thing to have kids have it on their desks. Okay, as I said, we're getting to near the end here. As I said in the beginning of, or in our first session, I have set this class up so that you can use some of what I'm suggesting that you do. You can use this for your hours your independent, I'm forgetting the name of it now, not independent study hours, but the hours that you need to log around English language learners and that kind of thing. So this isn't homework. This is extending the conversation, I'm calling it. You don't have to do this, but if you do it, please log the time it takes you to do one or more of these these reading assignments, not assignments, these reading opportunities. And I've checked this with Kelly. She's fine with this. So these are not homework. These are opportunities, and make sure you log your time. All right, this is homework. So what is due for next class? The holistic student profile, the holistic EL student profile. So you're going to fill it out for at least one student if you've only got one. If you have a whole lot, you're not going to do any more than 5 students. And those 5, or even if you have 3, if you could, if it's possible, choose where you've got sort of a beginner, an intermediate, and somebody who's emerging, somebody who's somebody who's bridging on the other end, kind of thing. So you've got a variety potentially, if you can do that. I want you to read chapter 4 in the California Practitioner's Guide. I want you to pay special attention to pages 150 through 175. It's a big chapter, but a lot of that chapter is kind of examples. So it's not as long and onerous as it might at first appear. But again, I will repeat, if there's anything that you need to be familiar with, it's this document as it pertains to English language learners and special education, right? So this is speaking this is speaking your language. This is speaking the language of special education teachers, and what you are expected to know and be able to do. All right. Your homework is also to choose and record 3 speaking supports, 3 oral supports. Am I going to check it next time? No, but so that you don't procrastinate and end up with a whole lot to do right before the log is due, put 3 in there from tonight, or a combination of what you've done before that helps support students' oral language. All right. And then I want you to go into the ELD standards. It's linked here. The California ELD standards, chapter 3. And I want you to read over the standards for your grade level. So chapter 3 has it's a long chapter because it has all the grade levels, K through 12. Actually, grades 9 and 10 are combined, and 11 and 12 are combined, but all the rest are their own grade levels. I want you to find the grade level that makes most sense for you and to read over the ELD standards for your grade level. You are going to be using these in developing a lesson plan. One of the things that you do in this program is create lesson plans, right? I'm not going to have you create a full-blown lesson plan. I'm going to have you use one that you've used or that you've written. I'll tell you more about that next class. But one of the things you are asked to do in your lesson plan is cite ELD standard or standards that are going to be addressed with your lesson plan. So the more you become familiar with what those ELD standards are for your grade level, the better off. And again, I'm asking you kind of thinking through the lens of, if I was going to create a lesson, if I'm going to teach something, what ELD standard or standards makes the most sense? What just sort of already is relevant for what I'm planning to teach. Okay, so that's your homework. And in the Canvas response, it's in Canvas for formative assessment session 2. So I ask that you go in there and get that done before next Tuesday. And I will be seeing you Tuesday evening, October 4th via Zoom. Of course, the Zoom link, as you know, is there in Canvas. And I'll be here in person for week number 3, where we are planning for success. We're going to be taking the standards, the strategies, putting them together and talking about that lesson plan. How do we plan instruction based on what we know about the students, the standards, the strategies. Okay, so that's it for tonight. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you Tuesday night. All right, bye-bye.